Okay, here we go, starting part three. Like I've said in the other two videos, is that I began this quest actually just kind of by accident. I saw that the new Pope was coming in. I'm not throwing shade at the Pope. I'm just saying that we have to look at people's claims, not their personalities. This is very important. So I started talking with Catholics online, and it exposed a few holes in my own, but I also seeing holes in their argumentative structure. I saw five things I wanted to do, but it would be too complex to throw them into one. I may hit the other four at another time. One of them, like I've said, is that the Catholics claim we gave you the Bible. If it wasn't for us, you wouldn't have the Bible. The Roman Catholic Church gave you the Bible. Now you'll have to watch the other two videos. I'm not going to run through all of them to say that the short version is um, the Bible at the time, the New Testament after the time of Christ was in the Greek trade language, and it grew up in Greece. Later on, somewhere after 100 AD, between 100 and 350, it was translated into the ecclesiastical legalese, the legal language of the Romans, which was the Latin. I'm also stating that a lot of people maybe didn't read Latin as much or didn't care for Latin. They worked with trade language all the time, and maybe they even worked with Greeks because Greek was still a common trade language. Like I said, in this world, people would often be multilinguistic. Like I said, in Israel itself, you would have, of course, the ecclesiastical legal language of Latin. You'd have the trade language of Greece if you wanted to trade with people and do things. Then you had the cultural language of Hebrew, and you may even had Aramaic up in Galilee, which is more of a dialect. So you had these different languages going on, and people could read multi languages. This is also why Pilate wrote on when Christ was put on the cross. He wrote Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews, in three different languages to tell everybody what was going on. So we have this, and I covered also this book in part two, where we talked about how older documents, but biblical documents, were put into four categories: those that were accepted, those that were rejected, those that were studied and accepted, and those that were just, these are history. And that's the way it was. And so you even have, I looked at this one and brought it up. There's a lot of history in here, which is probably leaning into uh, the Apocrypha being a historically reliable. I believe in Maccabees historically. I believe that what happened in Hanukkah happened. Hanukkah, got that messed up. I believe that what happened in Hanukkah happened. But I don't believe that the story about it is canon. Canon is different than history. You've got a lot of, for what we call the 400 silent years in the Bible, there's a lot of stuff going on. It's kind of boring. It's kind of like when God leaves the scene, it's just one guy fighting another, one guy fighting another. This group fights this group and this group, and it's just back and forth. You're like page after page. I just wind up skimming it. Nothing's happening. God wasn't speaking. He stopped speaking after Nehemiah, Malachi, depends on which you're going with, and didn't start again until the time of Christ. So we get this. So where I'm going into now is why you're dealing with now. I'm going to lean into, you're dealing with manuscripts and churches. Okay, so the church is up and running. It's running down in the Latin, and that's the Western civilization. You also have Eastern civilization with the Greek Orthodox. You also have down south, you have the Ethiopians. The Ethiopians had their own Bible. And during that, and then after, of course, 1453, you have, and after Luther and stuff, you have what's known as the Reformation, and you have what we call the Holy Bible proper. So I've got a list. I'm going to put this one up for us to look at. I'm just showing the list. I'll make sure that I get it onto the screen so you can look at. But we're dealing with four documents and basically four groups. So you got four documents and four groups. We're dealing with Old Testament, New Testament, Apocrypha, and Septuagint. We're dealing with those four groups. Those are groups. Now, sometimes you'll have books in the different groups. You also have the Roman Catholic Bible, the Ethiopian Bible, Greek Orthodox, and what we now know as the Protestant Bible. So there's four. We're dealing with four different groups of documents and four churches who analyze these documents and make the changes. I'm not going to go into each one in too much depth, but we're dealing with 4 documents and 4 groups. So we understand, of course, you understand the Roman Catholics and where they came from, the Latin Bible, and with Damascus the First and Jerome and all of them, also Augustine and all these other teachers that became the Roman Catholic Church. You also have the Protestants, which began with, I'll throw in Calvin, I'll throw in Luther, I'll throw in Zwingli, I'll throw in Knox, I'll throw in Desiderius Erasmus and George Mungus. I'll join these people that were in the Protestant understanding. I don't have a lot of, I could look it up. There's a lot of leaders of the Greek Orthodox that led the Greek Orthodox Church and still lead it today. It's still around today. This is not a knock on anybody that's just talking about them. You also have a strong grouping of the Ethiopian Bible, and the Ethiopian Church is strong. All of these groups are here in America. Like I said, not throwing shade on anybody. I enjoy freedom of religion. I think we should just debate it and talk about it instead of fighting over it. So that's what this is meant to be. So when we look at the Apocrypha is basically 14 books. So Judith, Tobit, Baruch, and I'll mispronounce some of these. Wisdom of Solomon, Sariah, 1st and 2nd Maccabees, additions to Esther, Prayer of Manasseh, 1st and 2nd Esdras, Susanna, and Bel and the Dragon. Those last 2 were probably also known as additions to Daniel, additions to Daniel. So you've got 14 books there. These are what's known as the Apocrypha. Now, the Apocrypha was picked out of history. That's what I'm saying. It's like going to a library and saying, I want these 14 books. You pull them off, you hold them under your arm or something. That was the Apocrypha. It was 14 books picked out of all of history and given a name, Apocrypha. And like I said, they have historical value. They're just not canon. Even I'll throw in that Jerome didn't even think they were canon. He went up. He did not want to put the Apocrypha inside the Bible. He wanted to be an external, extra addendum put after the Bible. But no, Damascus wanted to just throw them in like cards, into the deck and shuffle them into the Old Testament. He didn't want to do that, but he was overruled by Damascus. So really, when you look at the Latin Vulgate Bible, it's really Damascus's Bible. Not really Jerome's, because Jerome did not want those books in there. He wanted to put them at the end as an extra books of explanation of cultural understandings if you want to read them. One people will say, well, why did the 1611 Bible have the Apocrypha? Same reason. At the time, they didn't have Swindoll. They didn't have, all these other books that we have. They didn't have Christian books shelves and bookstores and all these books that line our shelves. So having some extra documents that might have some traditional cred, but not canon. If you look at something traditionally, you can take it or leave it. Well, our tradition is we do this and do that, but that's just man talking. The canon, the 66 books, are God talking. So backing up here, Old Testament, the Tanakh, was always the 39 books. This is accepted today. This has always been accepted. There was never a time that the Jews in recorded history have ever accepted the Apocrypha, any grouping of it, as canon. Yes, and they probably have more apocryphal books. I'm sure they have a lot more books in their history. If you realize that they created, of course, the Mishnah and the Talmud. These are traditional writings that the Jews will follow and discuss and go back and forth, but they're not everybody follows everything in the Talmud. Not everybody follows everything in the Mishnah. They will debate back and forth. This is a little bit like denominationalism in Christianity. Not everybody's a Baptist. Not everybody follows Methodist theology. Not everybody's a Presbyterian or a Calvinist. But canon is different than these traditions. That's what I'll say. So the 39 books were it. To the Jews, and this is where I got into with a kid, that the 27 books are static. They are considered, to the Christian, the Word of God, the 27 books. Now, I know that the Ethiopians added more New Testament books. That would be an interesting discussion to make. But they were not accepted by other groups. So they put those in there. Again, they're like a New Testament Apocrypha. They weren't accepted by the other groups. An interesting discussion is the Septuagint. And I get a lot of guys when I talk about the Septuagint. The Roman Catholics will say, we follow the Septuagint. We follow the Septuagint. We accept these books as Septuagint. Now remember, Roman Catholics have the 39 books. They accept the 27 books. They add only 7 of the 14 of the Apocrypha. They accept Tobit, Judith, Baruch, Wisdom of Solomon, Sirach, 1st and 2nd Maccabees. These 7 books are considered the Apocrypha to the Roman Catholics. But they leave out a bunch of others. In fact, when you look at the Septuagint, they will say, well, these were in the Septuagint. Yeah, but the Septuagint has the whole 14 of the Apocrypha plus 4 more. They had 3rd Maccabees, Psalms of Solomon, the 151st Psalms, and the letters of Jeremiah. Why is it you didn't put these into your Roman Catholic Bible? That's the question. See, to history, you're as guilty of, to the Septuagint, what you say the Protestants are to you. You'll look at the Protestants saying, you're leaving out books. But the Septuagint will look at the Roman Catholics and say, you're leaving out books. We have a list here that you didn't even consider. You grabbed 7 of ours and said, okay, we're good. But you ignored all these others. You don't consider them as canon. So the Greek Orthodox also, they have 39 books, 27 books. They accept the 14 as the Apocrypha. They also add the letter of Jeremiah and 3rd Maccabees. And I'll show this again. It's going to be sitting up there for you to look. Put it right here, but I'm going to put it also for you to see and read. Here's where I'm going at the very, very end. If I got Jews, and I say that with respect, if I got the Jews, the Protestants, the Roman Catholics, Greek Orthodox, and the Ethiopians to all come together and sit in the room. And I said, okay, everybody stand up who believes that the 39 books are the Word of God. Everybody would stand up. Everybody stand up, right? Because all those groups say the 39 books are the Word of God. All right, now I want you to stand up if you believe the 27 books of the New Testament. Now the Jews, of course, would not. But the other 3 would stand up. The Protestants, the other 4, the Protestants, Roman Catholics, the Ethiopians, and the Greeks would all stand up. Okay, now the Apocrypha and of course Septuagint do not have the New Testament because they were written before the time of Christ. I will maintain here real quick, I didn't talk about the Septuagint. The Septuagint is just a book of library books. Like I said, not all of the Septuagint was considered canon by anybody. When the Roman Catholics say it's because of the Septuagint, when they lean in and say we trust the Septuagint writing, well, why do you? It wasn't canon. So, and you actually came from the Greek. All the Latin Bibles came from the Greek, and they will take the Greek Septuagint for their Old Testament, which I think the funny thing is the Greek Septuagint, I'm off a tangent real quick, the Greek Septuagint came from the Masoretic text. So if you say, somewhere in history, around the time of the birth of the Septuagint, at the time of Ptolemy, before that, all you had was the Masoretic text. So if the Septuagint differs with the Masoretic text came first. It's the Masoretic text and the Greek documents that we use because those are the most reliable documents on the planet. Not everybody used the Apocrypha. Not everybody used the Septuagint. In fact, there was a time when there was no Septuagint. There was a time when there was no there was no Apocrypha. There was not a time when there wasn't. We have the Old Testament. So what I want to say is, if I had all these groups, everybody would stand up for the Old Testament, and then all of us Christians of one kind or another would all stand up for the 27 books. So if we say, the Catholics will use the word, they'll use the word universal. That's what Catholic means. Well, Catholic is universal only in your universe. It's not Catholic in the sense of the entire thing. See, that's why some of these writings, I'll go in and they'll talk about Ignatius. I think Ignatius was talking about Greeks, Latins, everybody. That was to him considered the Catholic Church, but they stole that and made it only about a subset. Now this subset is Catholic. It's universal within itself. But in the universal church, the 39 books are God and the 27 books are God. Everything else is up for debate. Now, if you want to follow them traditionally, I got no problem with that. But when you start saying they equal to the 27 books or equal to the 39 books, history disagrees. Because all of us believe in the 39 books. All of us don't find the Apocrypha or the Septuagint to be canon. All of us agree with the 27 books, but then all of us don't agree with the additional books in the Ethiopian Bible as canon. So anything additional should be considered like your Christian bookstore. If you want to read Maccabees, if you want to read some of these others, if you want to read, Jubilees, they even had an Ethiopian Bible has the Book of Enoch. I've read the Book of Enoch. Not going to heaven or hell because I read it. It's interesting to see what people think. So that's where I'm going is, at the end of the day, the Roman Catholics do to the Septuagint what they say the Protestants do to them. They only picked 7 books out of 14, 15, 16, 17, 7. Out of 18 books, they picked 7 and left the rest on the shelf. And we could find out why, but their reasonings would be the same reasonings that the Protestants used to leave out the Apocrypha. And my number one reasoning is the Jews didn't accept it. They never accepted it. It was never quoted by Christ. And the Septuagint was only alluded to if you read certain documents a certain way. But then again, the Septuagint came from the Masoretic anyway. So even if Jesus did know some of the Septuagint, he was still quoting a variation of the Masoretic. So it all goes back to the Masoretic. It all goes back to the 27 books. So that's my saying is, Roman Catholics, you gave us a Bible, the Latin Vulgate. You didn't give us the Bible. I've got some other videos, where am I pointing at, that I'm going to show you. You can look at them if you want to, that tell you more about where I've done my study to say the superiority of the King James Bible and the superiority of these Greek documents. So there you go. Roman Catholics, thank you for the Latin Vulgate. To me, it has historical significance. But when I want canon, I go to the Greek.